Hello summoners, and welcome back to another episode of OP Patch Predictions. My name is Nathan Ng, and today we'll be looking at some of the changes coming on patch 11.10 and how they may change or fail to change the state of the game. We'll start off by addressing the pretty huge change that we're going to be seeing in the jungle this patch, one of the more significant systematic changes in recent times, and one that I, along with pretty much every high elo player, think is a really bad one. While it can be easy to flame Riot for choices like this whole thing sort of just goes to show that it can be really difficult to balance certain things and make them more accessible to lower brackets while not punishing players at the higher levels. And that brings us to today's question of the day. What do you think about the changes geared towards accessibility? I think I've already made my distaste towards these particular changes clear, but in general, I don't think it's inherently bad to make some things appeal to a broader audience. That being said, I don't think everything has to appeal to everybody either. For example, take champions such as Aphelios or Nidalee. I think things can be more nuanced in certain categories, but that's just my take. I want to hear from you. So let us know your answers in the comments down below. Now let's get back into the video. The overarching goal is to increase jungle accessibility, aka make jungle a role that is easier to play for lower skilled players. With the preseason, Riot started working at this by normalizing camp resistances and removing the invisible mechanics in the jungle by swapping Scuttle's resistances to a shield, and removing Gromp's empowered initial auto attacks altogether. To achieve this goal, the 4 sub-goals are as follows. More forgiving jungle clears, mostly through reducing camp damage and increasing spawn timers. Widening the viable champ pool by making Smite break Skullcrab's shield, as well as a readjustment to sustain by lowering Omnivamp on jungle items but increasing the percent of max HP healing by using Smite on a monster. Reducing snowball potential by reintroducing comeback XP and removing Smite scaling damage, with Smite simply having 2 tiers now. Camp Leashing Clarity, which will come at a future patch, where you'll be able to see an indicator when you're reaching close to the max leash range of a camp. First, I'll say that not every change here is necessarily bad. For example, widening the jungling pool can be quite nice to add some flavor to the game, and the future idea of showing leash range is a healthy way to help newer players learn the role. But changes that actually take away the rewards for getting in and out of the jungle for the opponents are just not really something you want to see. Making the game easier and more accessible for the newer and lower elo players is one thing, but they shouldn't be trying to decrease the gap between 2 players in the same role by giving the bad players a free way to catch up. The biggest offenders here are the changes to Smite damage and the reintroduction of catch-up XP. In case you weren't somewhat aware, Smite's damage currently increases incrementally every level, but on 11.10, it will start off by doing 450 damage, with that going up to 900 damage once you finish your last Smite quest, which is using Smite 5 times. Currently, when you get a lead on your opponent, it allows you to throw your weight around a little bit. This can make a huge difference in the early game when the camp burst damage is still low, and 20 or 40 damage is the difference between winning a Smite fight over a camp, especially when you're evading or being invaded at one of the buffs. This becomes more important at the later stages of the game, where sometimes a 3 or 4 level lead gives you a much more better chance of winning a crucial Smite fight on Dragon or Baron buff. As for catch-up XP, I've always been of the opinion that having it on jungle camps is one of the worst systematic features of the game, period. When you're behind, you should have to rely on making a risky play by taking down a more fed member on the enemy team, or even put a huge chunk of catch-up XP on the epic monsters. So even when you can't force a kill, you can play with your winning lanes to go for an objective that puts you back into the game. So, TLDR, some jungle changes are actually really nice to see, but the overall impact will be a negative one that hurts skill expression in the role. So what champs will be good after this? Despite snowballing being weakened, we think most of the same junglers will remain top tier picks. In fact, with catch-up XP being on camps, you should even say turbo gankers like Elise and Rek'Sai will be even stronger, since you can mindlessly gank without considering a decent path, and then go clear camps without being too far behind. Alright, enough about the jungle. The next thing to talk about is Kale. Of all the individual champ changes that we're seeing this patch, hers is by far the most significant. Kale's identity is supposed to be one of a true hyper carry. Meanwhile, other strong scaling carries can snowball early and run the game with items alone, Kale's design directly prevents her from being able to do just that. Even if you spoon feed her, her limited range and lack of wave clear make her one of the easiest to bully laners in the early levels. But with enough time to scale, her DPS ramps up to insane proportions, and she's able to wipe out entire enemy teams in seconds when she's full build. Balancing a kit like this can be pretty difficult, since making her early game too weak means that she never actually gets to scale, but having too strong of an early game makes reaching that late game a little bit too easy. Riot has tried to even things out by buffing the early game and cutting down on her late game scaling, but with there being plenty of other hard scaling champions that have better early games anyway, what's the point of making her work when you have better options? So now they're taking a different approach. The buffs that we're seeing on this patch target her scaling. The first of the two is her level 11 form, increasing her flame damage AP ratio from 20% to 25%. While 5% may not seem like that much, when you consider that this is on every auto attack, for a champion that is building Nashor's and Berserker Greaves, that adds up pretty quickly. This can easily make or break Kale's duels against tougher skirmishers in the side lane, on top of her actually coming online earlier for team fights. The second buff is her range increase at level 16. Instead of just lazily tackling on more damage to an already powerful late game carry, this buff makes it so that Kale is more easily able to dish out damage in team fights, making her viable in more situations. These buffs are being done in a nice and healthy way, and are one of Riot's better examples of balancing in the last few months. I'm personally excited to see Kale coming back as a meta pick, because I love the concept of actual hyper carries. If you're as excited as I am, but you're not too confident in surviving her bumpy early game, be sure to head over to ProGuides.com. Our top tier coaches can teach you all the skills that you need, from the basic fundamentals up to the more advanced techniques, so you can learn how to pilot a hyper carry like Kale and get consistent results. So head over and book your session now. Now without further ado, let's get back to the topic. Looking back at the AP ratio buff, something to consider is how it will change the items that you want to build on Kale. While the most popular build is Nashor's Riftmaker Lichbane core, a lot of Kale players opt out for crit items as their core build and then go AP afterwards. However, between that AP ratio buff and Riftmaker getting a buff of its own, you'll always want to lock into the full AP build path. Here's a build in case you're interested. You'll start off with Doran's Ring, then rest Berserker's Greaves. In some lanes, you may want to even pick up Leeching Lair after boots for a sustain that it grants. Your first full item will be Nashor's Tooth, and after that you'll build into Riftmaker. Before this patch, you normally go for Lichbane after Riftmaker, but to make the most out of the buff, you're going to want to go for Rabadon's Death Cap and then Lichbane and then Void Staff. For runes, you want to run Press the Attack, Overheal, Alacrity, and Coup de Grace. And for your secondaries against strong lane opponents, you want to go Bone Plating and Overgrowth. If you could get one of those rare free lanes like Ornn, you can go for Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter, or be really greedy and go for Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm. Your stat runes will be Attack Speed, Adaptive Force, and either Armor or Magic Resist. Just note that while Kale is incredibly OP in the late game, that's only when you can properly get there. You probably want to save picking her for when you have a counter pick unless you're 100% confident in your ability to play safe and scale up. Other than Kale, there aren't really too many significant buffs on this patch, causing new things to move up to the OP tier. Lux's E buff was really good, but at the last minute, Mark Getter tweeted that the buff to her AP ratio will only be 5%, down from the previously planned 10%. The base damage at max rank is going up by 20, which adds up when you land a few of them, but that's more beneficial to support Lux. As a mid laner, your goal is to one-shot targets with your combo, so adding tiny bits of base damage aren't really exactly conducive to that. Still, a buff is a buff, and in some fringe cases, 5% AP and 20 damage may net you the kill. Looking at nerfs, we're actually seeing a somewhat meaningful change to a long-time problematic champ, Darius. His longer E cooldowns means that it'll be harder to stick targets in team fights, meaning that if he snowballs in the laning phase, you have more potential to kite him out. Don't get me wrong, he's still going to be oppressive to deal with, but at the very least, there's a bit more counterplay. Aside from that, many of the nerfs seem kind of sort of placebo-ish. Talon's Q ratio is going down, but considering the champ can one-shot you as early as level 2, and has some of the best roaming possible, I still don't think that this will stop his snowball potential. A movement speed nerf usually means making it easier to get onto a champion, or inhibiting their ability to roam, but 5 movement speed isn't all that noticeable, and won't have too much of an impact on Katarina's ability to perform as a flexible assassin that is just as comfortable one-shotting a single champion as she is wiping out an entire team. And lastly, of all the champions on the nerf list, the least impactful is probably the one that we're going to be seeing to Galio. Galio is so incredibly strong at the moment because he doesn't know what the phrase losing lane means. He either wins or goes even in every single matchup, since he either beats up the other laner or shoves the wave in and roams for his jungler or bot lane. He has plenty of damage for trading 1v1, has a CC and burst damage to be a great skirmisher, and on top of all of that, his ultimate is one of the best in the games for team fights, giving you the ability to reach the enemy backline by comboing with an allied diver. You can also pivot and use it defensively, ulting one of your carries when they're the ones being dove, CCing the enemy champion that's trying to kill them, while zoning off the enemy team from entering your ultimate's huge radius. Galio has been a massively dominant force as a mid laner for months, and at this point, that won't really change anytime soon. On top of being really OP, he's insanely easy to play, and literally anybody can pick him up for free LP, so abuse him while you can. Anyway, that wraps up things for our OP Patch Predictions 11.10 edition. Hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, be sure to sub so you never miss out on content such as this. Remember, let us know what you think about the changes that cater specifically for lower skill levels in the comments down below. And one last thing, don't forget to check out our Discord in the description box below, where you can discuss League further or just hang out and be a part of the community. I can't wait to see you guys back in the next video, but until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.